Okay, welcome back to this video. In the last videos, we've actually set up our game. We've increased the way that this game works purely by adding in a finish line and starting to provide feedback for our player. It comes up with a you win message for us, as well as it shows on top of our car a you win label. So we're actually going to go through and add a restart button for the player to click when they're actually going through. So you'll hit play now, and you'll actually see that you've still got the mouse, so we can actually click a button if the button is there. So what we need to do is we need to go back to our trigger script, because we want the button to appear once that trigger's been clicked. However, I'm just going to do a little bit of a cleanup of the code, because I don't actually need this label here, or this comment. Remember, that is there to help us write down and figure out how things work. So I'm actually going to go Control X, cut that out, and just place it above, just so I can actually see it just a little bit better. So I can see that the X position of the screen is declared by this one, the Y position done by this one, the width of what it is, and the height of what it is. And this will make a little bit more sense in a moment. The other thing that we want to do is we actually want to show this restart button. So on line 17, and you can see how that's been written, I'm actually going to go through and create a button. And to do that, we actually can go through and just write GUI.button. Now again, if you're not sure how things work, select it and hold down Control and apostrophe to load that up. Once you've got that, GUI.button makes a single press button, the user clicks them and something happens immediately. So that's exactly what we want. And you'll actually see that there's a very, very big example here. Now it's always good to actually copy it and paste it into a new script. However, that's not what we need. So I'm actually going to go through and write it and give you a hand on how to write these. So the very first thing that we're going to do is we're actually going to create what our button looks like and where it is. So the very first thing is when I open up a bracket, it kind of gives me an idea of what I need. Before the first comma, I need a position, which is a Unity Engine rectangle. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write rect for rectangle. I'm then going to open my next bracket and define what that rectangle is. And remember, the rectangles are defined by an X position and a Y position. So let's just set that to 10, and let's just say 50 for now, just to get a bit of variation. The width of my button, I might set to, let's say 300, and my height I might set to 40. Now it doesn't matter what values you use, but you will actually start to realize what numbers kind of work for testing out. The very next thing that I need to do is I need to say what my button's going to say. And then we know this button's actually going to be restart. So let's write down restart game. Close my bracket, which lines up with the rectangle, and then end with a semicolon. Save that off with Control S or going File, Save, and go back to Unity. Just make sure we don't get any errors in our console window, and let's hit play. Let's see what happens. Already, you actually see this restart game button. We've got the same problem as the you win section. So if I drive through, you win appears in the event center. But restart game doesn't. Okay, so we only want the restart game option to actually appear once the player finishes. So what we need to do is we need to go back to our trigger script, and this all actually lines up with what our brackets are doing. So we want it to appear when it's finished, but only when it's finished will it actually run this code. So we need to select this line of code and place it in the area that will only run or only display when finished is true. Again, if there's anything that you're not quite understanding in the way I'm explaining it, please ask me. So GUI.button. Okay, there we go. Save this. Let's go back to our game and hit play. Okay, let's go through. And you'll see that our restart game button appeared afterwards. So just to show you again that it didn't appear, you can see that it hasn't appeared yet. Same with the label is missing. Alright, so from here, One thing we didn't do is we didn't test what happened when we clicked it. So let's quickly test it. Drive through, allows the button to appear, and let's click what... Oh, hang on, my button's not doing anything. That's not good. So what we've got to do is we've got to tell our button what to do. So what we actually need to do is we need to actually place an if statement in. And to do that, we actually need to go if open bracket for our GUI.button, go all the way to the end and close our bracket. Now the interesting thing is when we have a function, we don't need our semicolon at the end. Same as if we have an if statement, we don't need our semicolon at the end. So what we need to do here is we need to get rid of our semicolon at the end of our if button statement. And again, place in our curly brackets so we can actually read it. And we can press tab to go in. So what we need to happen is we could actually tell it exactly just to restart the game. Even if we ended with a semicolon, that's not going to work. That's not how we actually program. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go debug.log just to tell me if my actual game is registering the button click. Now I'm going to open the bracket with a quotation and say restart button was pressed with awesomeness. I've got no idea how to spell that, so that's a good enough guess. So from there, restart button was pressed with awesomeness. Let's actually save it with Control S. Again, if you are still going file save, you will have that option enabled, but it's a good habit to pick up to be saving all the time. So let's go back to Unity. Let's clear out our console and let's hit play. Now, what we've got to do is remember, we're actually testing to see if that button press comes up. So what we've got is it says you win, which allows us to see our message and our restart game button. I'm going to hit restart game button. When I do, we should see an extra message appear on the console. Right. Restart button was pressed with awesomeness. Okay, so it's actually working. But we've now got to tell our game how to restart. So how could we do that? So we've got a debug.log saying that our game's restarting. But that's not actually going to restart our game. What we need to do is we need to go to our scripting reference. So one habit that I have is I just type in the thing that I want to do, I select it, and to go to the scripting reference just to see if anything's that's restart. Okay, having a quick look at this, doesn't look like it helps me. So let's try another one in our search bar on the left and just type in reload. Not quite. So once we're actually starting to get to this point where we can't quite find what we're after, we actually need to use something to do a little bit more research. So we can either start searching for other things, or we can actually start doing a bit of research on things like Bing or Google or Unity answers in the forums and start doing a bit of reading to figure out how we could restart our game. In the case of this, I'm actually going to help you out. I'm actually going to go application. So application is one of those things to actually go through that will help you out. One of the things to do that, let's go application here. You'll actually be able to click on that one and it takes you here. Access to application runtime data. And this is a little bit above what we're actually doing. And you can actually see in the static variables, we can actually see one called loaded level, stuff like that. Not really what we're after. We actually need one of the static functions. So not a variable, but a function. And these are the things that Unity's already written for us to help us make it easier. So it actually goes to another script. And it says, loads the level by its name or index. Okay, well let's try load level. And you'll actually see this application.load level and high score. All right, so let's actually go through and go and select this. And you can actually see it loads level by its name or index. Before you can load a level and it goes through that you actually have to use file and build settings in Unity to add the levels you need to the level list there. Okay, so we need to make sure we come back and do that. So file, build settings in Unity. So let's quickly go through, select this, go back to Unity, and instead of having the word restart, I'm actually going to have application.load level and high score. So save this off, go back to Unity, and the one thing that it did tell us to do was use File, Build Settings, and add the levels I need. So this is an extra little snippet of a lesson. We will talk about building games properly later. So back in Unity, File, Build Settings, okay. And it says Scenes in Build. And what I need to do is with that game scene selected, I need to go Add Current. Okay, I don't need to click Build and Run. I can just close that off. And now let's hit play and let's see what happens. So drive forward. Okay, it shows the restart game button. Click our button. Oh, hang on, we get an error. Level high score couldn't be loaded because it's not been added to the build settings. Okay, so what does that error message mean? Level high score. Well, let's have a look back in our build settings. So File, Build Settings. You'll see that it's actually not called high scores, it's called complete scene. Remember the scene that we opened? So what we need to do is we'll close this off, go back to MonoDevelop and change the word high score to complete scene. And save that off. Go back to Unity, hit play, and let's just see what happens here. Let's just see if it's going to work again. So drive through. It says you win. Awesome. I'll hit the restart game button and it reset us. No red errors. Comes through. So let's just go a little bit further along the track to make sure it's not just a glitch. So we're in a completely different spot now. We can actually see the bridge. So I'm going to hit restart the game and it takes me back to the start. It restarts the sound. Restarts everything for us. Awesome. That's what we're after. So from here, what we actually need to do is, let's go and clean up our code just a little bit, is we've got complete scene. So I'm actually going to go through and comment some of my code of what's actually happening. So the very first one I'm going to do is I'm going to hit enter and just say reloads the same level. And write called complete scene, because I placed those those forward slashes at the start, and it's been grayed out in some different, it might be a different color for you guys, but it is gray for mine. It actually means it's a comment, and it's not going to be read by the computer. Okay, so it reloads the same level called complete scene. Great. That's actually going to tell me what it's going to do. The other thing is I can just go through and just talk about some of the other things. So this is going to be restart button to press. And although I've got that GUI.label there, what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to go through and write down label saying you win. So that allows me to actually go through and kind of give some information in regards to if someone else was to come and read my code. I'm going to save that off. And in the next video, what we're actually going to look at is currently it's just got that very, very small you win label appearing when you race. What we're going to actually do is we're going to make it a little bit more artistic, a little bit bigger. So this you win is not what we really want. We'll make it bigger so it's a little bit more impressive, so you really want to race. Other than that, I'll see you in the next video.